Avery stood just outside the glass-paneled VIP lounge, her ID badge still clipped to the lanyard draped around her neck, pristine, sharp, with the gold-embossed insignia that marked her as one of them. Not a guest, not a visitor, a founder. The founder, her heels made no sound on the imported marble, and yet every security guard turned toward her like they'd heard a thunderclap. One of them a man in a suit far more expensive than his salary could ever justify, placed a hand on her shoulder like she was trespassing, like she didn't belong. "Ma'am, this space is for invited patrons only," he said. His tone was steady, but rehearsed like someone reading a line he didn't understand. Avery didn't speak. She didn't have to. She simply held up her phone, showed him the blueprint email time-stamped, signed off, filed from her own encrypted domain. The domain no one was supposed to have access to anymore. That's when his hand twitched, and that's when everything began to tilt. He shoved her, not hard, not violent, just enough to leave a smudge of humiliation across her chest that no dry cleaner would ever scrub out. As she stumbled back, steadying herself against the wall beneath a velvet-framed portrait of the very first board, meeting the one where her signature sat in gold foil beside the others, flickered. The screen in the corner of the lounge, which usually played luxury brand promos on loop, froze mid-frame. A child's voice, staticky, cracked through the lounge speakers. Just 3 words. Asterisk, asterisk, why is she back? Asterisk, asterisk. The lounge fell silent. None of the guests moved, not even the ones mid. Their smiles hung in the air like mannequins. Avery's breath caught. She turned to the man who pushed her, expecting confusion, denial, anything. But he wasn't looking at her. He was staring fixed at the screen, and his eyes were wet, not with tears. With fear. No one else reacted. No one else heard it, except the old man seated near the corner window, half shrouded in shadow, ignored by the servers, untouched glass of bourbon sweating beside his hand. He raised his head slowly, his gaze locking onto hers like he'd waited years for this exact moment. Then, just as the manager rushed over to cover the commotion, the old man stood, walked past her, leaned in close, and whispered, asterisk, asterisk, they erased you. Asterisk, asterisk. The air turned colder than the AC could explain. Security didn't see him leave. Cameras didn't catch him entering. And when Avery turned to follow seconds later, he was gone. Like he'd never been there at all. Later that night, in a private backroom buried under a hotel alias she hadn't used since 2013, Avery opened her tablet to search for the company's original ledger, the file only she knew existed. It required retina, fingerprint, PASSCODE, and still, it was already open. At the top of the screen, in plain white font, asterisk, asterisk, welcome back, Dr. Avery Monroe. Meeting resumed. Memory splice. Incomplete. Asterisk, asterisk. Beneath that a photo. Time-stamped 3 hours in the future. Avery, walking into the lounge. Smiling, but her eyes were completely black. The screen dimmed on its own. A subtle click, like an old VHS tape, locking into rewind. Followed by a barely audible voice, soft, rasped. Not quite Hearse code from the tablet speaker. Asterisk, asterisk, they stitched you wrong. Asterisk, asterisk. Avery didn't move for a full minute. Her chest tightened as though someone had reached in and wound her lungs into a knot. She wasn't a stranger to glitches. She had spent most of her adult life in development labs where voices bled through headsets. Heat signatures vanished mid-scan, biometric devices registered phantom inputs. But this was different. This wasn't noise. It felt personal, intentional. She tapped the screen. Once, a blink static smeared across the timestamp hand, then shut down completely. Not powered off, gone. Like the system had yanked its own plug. She stared at her reflection in the black glass and felt, for the first time in a long while, completely foreign to herself. Her eyes were brown, still. Her nose, her jawline, her scar from when she'd hit the corner of her foster father's kitchen table at 10, it was all there. But the longer she looked, the more she swore her pupils pulse-dilated and undilated, not like an eye adjusting to light, but like a camera trying to focus on something it couldn't recognize. Her phone vibrated once. Asterisk, unknown caller, 003. Asterisk, she hadn't answered, but someone had. You're late to your own forgetting. The call cut. Avery threw the tablet into the drawer and locked it, but the image, the one from 3 hours in the future, had already burned itself behind her eyelids, her smile, eerie and wide, like someone wearing her skin, like she was the ghost, not the mystery. The next morning brought no relief. She awoke to the sound of a shower running, her body tensed in that old muscle memory kind of way, like when you know someone's in your house, and you also know they're not supposed to be. But she lived alone. Had for the last 8 years. She reached for her phone. No charging port, no cable, just blank metal where the charging port should have been. But shower stopped. Footsteps, slow, wet. She grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and crept toward the hallway. Her heartbeat pressed against her ears so loudly it blurred sound. But when she turned the corner, the bathroom door stood wide open, empty, dry, no puddles, no fog. Only a note. Folded, balanced perfectly on the tile. Asterisk, asterisk, you always forget room 604. Asterisk, asterisk, she didn't remember a room 604. Not in the hotel, not in the company building, not in her old apartment complexes. She tried to laugh, to rationalize, to find the thread. Maybe she had dreamed its stress hallucinations weren't uncommon. She'd gone weeks without real sleep before, back in the early development phases of Project Egress. But that project had been classified top floor only. No one outside the founding team even knew it existed. Only 3 of them had signed off on the final version. 2 were dead, and Avery had no memory of the final upload day. That was the truth. The raw, unmentionable truths she'd buried for years beneath polite boardroom smiles and TED Talk charisma. The night of the final phase. The memory she should have had where the neural system was embedded, uploaded, tested was just missing. And for years she convinced herself that blackout was intentional, a security wipe, a controlled severance for plausible deniability. But now, it pulsed like an open wound, a data gap that wasn't empty, just redacted. That night, as rain needled the window panes like tiny daggers, Avery finally left her suite. The hotel hallway was impossibly quiet. The kind of silence that felt curated poured over the walls like paint. She made her way down to the lobby, past the concierge who didn't so much as blink at her presence, and stepped into the elevator. She typed 6. The panel flickered, and there it was. Asterisk, asterisk. Room 604, asterisk, asterisk, unmarked. Off-grid, nestled between floor labels, that jumped from 603 to 605, as if the room never officially existed but had always been waiting. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway was wrong. Not broken, just outdated. Wallpaper peeled at the corners. Lights buzzed with the soft decay of 2003 motel wiring. She felt like she'd stepped into a memory not her own. Room 604's door was open. Just an inch. Just enough she pushed it. Inside, dim yellow light, 1 desk, 1 chair, 1 man. In his 30s, maybe younger. Handsome in the way washed-up actors are. Tired eyes, perfect jaw. Charisma with something rotted behind it. He smiled. Dr. Monroe, he said. Or, are we going by Avery again? She stared at him. Nothing clicked. No recognition. But he spoke with such ease, such intimacy. It made her nauseous. She sat, not because she trusted him but because she was done pretending anything was normal. What is this? He looked down at a recorder on the desk's small analog. Dusty hit play. Her voice. I don't want to remember. If I forget me, it stops. If I forget him, he can't call me back. If I forget 604, static. Then silence. The man tapped the edge of the desk gently. You came here last year. Same code, same question. You asked if you were real. He paused, tilted his head. He asked if the company ever existed. That's not possible, she whispered. But the certainty in her voice was a lie she tasted before it even finished. Leaving her mouth, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, Polaroids, real ones, physical. In them she stood in rooms she didn't recognize, talking to people she didn't remember. But the worst photo wasn't even of her. It was a child. 4 years old, maybe 5. Standing at the same desk, same tape recorder, same voice. If I forget him, he can't call me back. Avery stood, violently. The walls wavered. Who are you? He smiled again, gently, apologetically. I've gone by different names. Different versions of me. But you used to call me Reed. Sometimes, before the resets, before the locks. I don't know you. No, he said, standing too. That's the point. She backed away, toward the door. Her skin felt too tight, like her bones didn't fit anymore. Why would I do any of this? Why would I erase myself? Reed walked toward her slowly. Because you saw what came after. You saw what Project Egress really did. You weren't just the founder. You were the first upload. And you broke. No, you begged to forget. And I made sure you did. Again and again. Her hand hit the door, but it wouldn't budge. He leaned close. Look around, Avery. None of this is real. You know that, deep down. The hotel, the guards, the VIP lounge, you've been running your own loop, forgetting every time. But something's different now. You started remembering without the trigger. She shook her head. You're lying, am I? He pointed to the mirror across the room. It didn't show either of them. Only the empty chair. Only the tape recorder. Still playing, and Avery's voice, again. Asterisk, asterisk, if I forget him. Then a pause, then a whisper. He finds another host. Asterisk, asterisk. The room dropped to silence. Reed blinked, like a curtain had pulled across his brain. His voice, when he finally spoke, sounded different. Slower, heavier. Who are you? Avery stared. Her pulse climbed. What? He backed away, dazed. Why are you in my room? The tape shut off. And all the lights died. Darkness swallowed room 604. Whole, but not silence. Because somewhere in that black void, something was breathing. Not like a man, like something learning how to be a man. And then the voice came again, not Avery's, not Reed's but the child's. Asterisk asterisk you forgot me. So I remembered you. Asterisk asterisk the door creaked. And room 604 vanished from the floor plan. Again, Avery woke on the floor, jaw stiff from how long she must have been lying in that position, cheek pressed into the grain of aging wood. Fingers splayed outward like she had been trying to hold on to something. The light in room 604 had changed. Gone was the yellow lamp. Now it was the sickly blue of early morning filtered through dust-covered windows. The kind of light that made everything appear both real and off-phase. If reality were lagging behind her perception of it, her mouth was dry, lips cracked. Her head rang not with pain but with memory, thick, blurred, looping. The room was empty now. No chair, no desk, no reed, no recorder, no mirror. But on the wall, in a child's awkward handwriting, something had been scratched into the plaster with a rusted nail. Asterisk asterisk if you see her face, run. Asterisk asterisk she didn't ask who her was. The moment she read it, she already knew. By the time she reached the front desk, the hotel clerk, a young woman with sleepy eyes and a plastered corporate smile, acted like room 604 never existed. Ma'am, we only go up to 603. I can show you the fire map, if you'd like. The woman held up a laminated layout. 604 wasn't there. Avery barely nodded, playing along, her voice tight. Thanks, that's fine. As she turned, she caught her reflection in the concierge's polished marble counter only. It blinked. Once, before she did, she booked a flight to D.C. the same day. If there were answers anywhere, they'd be at the site of the original egress labs, buried beneath government funding, rebranded as a data ethics think tank, polished and sanitized for press visits and academic tours. But Avery had built the bones of that place. She remembered the basement layout. She knew which keycard doors weren't logged. She still had clearance, at least. The version she kept on a dead laptop sealed inside a safe she hadn't touched in over a decade. The lab was colder than she remembered. Physically, emotionally, the main floor had been gutted and remodeled to look like a co-working space for graduate fellows. All soft couches and whiteboards and glass walls that pretended to offer transparency. But below, down a service elevator that didn't appear on any modern maps, the past still existed. She stepped into the sublevel hallway and inhaled a smell she hadn't known she missed until it hit her. Sterile plastic, faint blood, machine oil. A memory glitch hit her then, sharp, uninvited, merciless. The elevator doors opened, and she saw her younger self. Not in real time, not in a hallucination, just a flash. Like a real slicing open behind her eyes. She was 27 again, lab coat stained with ink and old coffee. Tired, but electric. Reed was beside her, younger too, laughing at something she'd said, his hand brushing hers like an accident. She remembered thinking she might love him. That maybe, after all of this, she'd finally found someone who saw the whole of her and didn't flinch. Then the vision was gone. Her hands were her own again, older, real. She moved through the dark halls. Most of the rooms had been emptied, servers pulled, terminals wiped, but the final chamber, the original core, was still intact. Reinforced steel walls. Manual lock. System. No cameras. It had been designed to be forgettable on purpose. Memory containment, neural simulations, early behavioral overwrite tests. She entered the code. The door creaked open. Inside was a chair. Nothing more. No screens, no lights. Just a single, decaying medical chair, the kind used in sleep studies and psych evaluations. The leather was cracked and worn. The headrest still had straps. And on the floor, beside it, a folder, paper, untouched by time. Avery picked it up with shaking hands. Inside were transcripts, audio logs, case files, labeled not with names, but with dates. Dozens of them. All from before egress was ever funded. Before the company had a name. Before she had agreed to spearhead it. One page made her stop breathing. July 13, 1996. That was the day her foster sister, Lily, disappeared. Avery had always told herself she didn't remember what happened. She was only 13. She had a fever. The police said there were no signs of break-in, no struggle. Lily had simply vanished during the night. Her foster father said she must have run away. But here, in this folder, was an audio log dated the day before Lily vanished. A voice hype, static filtered, unmistakably a child's, saying, she told me not to tell Avery her real face. There was no way that file should exist. None. The project hadn't even been conceived in '96. But as she played the tape, she realized slowly, with rising dread, that the child wasn't just talking. She was describing the hotel, the lounge, the mirror, the black eyes, and the woman who always smiled wrong. It hit Avery like a gut punch she couldn't brace for. The project hadn't been about artificial intelligence or memory enhancements. That had been the shell. The sales pitch. But something had been feeding the idea into their minds long before they thought they were smart enough to invent it. A hidden truth, a seed planted, not innovation Replication, asterisk, they weren't designing a system, they were remembering one. Reed had called it a loop, a reset. But what if it wasn't a loop they were in? What if it was a trap? One constructed by something that didn't live in time the way humans did. A thing that needed to be forgotten so it could keep hiding, but not completely, just enough to stay fed. Avery staggered back. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped the folder. The pages scattered. One landed face up against the chair. Asterisk, asterisk, if the subject resists. Apply substitute memory. False trauma preferred. Asterisk, asterisk, she read it again. False trauma. Her hands curled into fists. All her life, she thought she'd been shaped by pain. Abandonment. Lily's disappearance. The cruel, shadowed edges of her past. But what if that pain was a placement, a smokescreen? AMISDIRECTION. To hide something worse. She bolted from the lab. Took the stairs. Didn't wait for the elevator. Heart pounding, throat raw, she reached her car and drove. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to breathe. To be somewhere that didn't reek of lies. The next morning, she woke on her couch, fully dressed. Blood on her palm from where she clutched her house keys. Too tightly, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A video. She hesitated. Then played it. It was surveillance footage. From the hotel lounge. The moment she'd been shoved. Only she wasn't there. Security was escorting someone out. But not her. The woman was older. Her skin pale, her eyes deeply set, her face blurred, distorted, as though the footage couldn't quite render it. But her gait, her frame, her movements were unmistakable. She watched herself get shoved out of the lounge, smiling, calm, almost proud. And behind the glass, watching, was Avery, the real her. But the timestamp, July 13, 1996. Avery dropped the phone, her knees gave out. She crawled to the bathroom, vomited, sobbed, whispered nonsense into the sink. The numbers didn't make sense. The technology didn't exist back then. And yet what if the technology was never the point? What if she hadn't built anything? What if she'd been pulled, layer by layer, into a memory that wasn't hers, made to believe it was? What if none of this had ever been her life? She ran to the mirror, looked herself dead in the eyes. They were black, just for a second, just long enough. And behind her, in the reflection, a figure stood in the hallway, not moving. No face, no form. Just a presence. She turned. Nothing there. But the bathroom door had been locked. Avery backed away, whispered one word like it might open some kind of exit. Lily. The lights cut out. And from the silence, something whispered back. Asterisk, asterisk, you. Remembered, too early. Asterisk, asterisk, and suddenly everything she thought she knew about the story about herself, about what they'd told her about, who she had ever been, broke, and played backward. The first sign came not in a scream or some violent, cinematic outburst, but in something far quieter, far more sinister. Avery was in the grocery store, somewhere between the rows of batteries and impulse buy magazines when she noticed it. A child's crayon drawing, taped to the frozen foods freezer. It was crude, like any child's might be, stick figures. Scribbled, sky, jagged house, but something in her stomach twisted before her brain could name it. The house had no windows. The stick figures all had black, featureless faces. And at the bottom, just above the grass, a line was written in perfect adult handwriting. Asterisk, asterisk, we all forgot her face. Asterisk, asterisk, she tore it down and left without buying anything. Pulse stuttering. Her phone buzzed the second she stepped outside. A photo. No sender. The image was blurred but familiar. The surveillance still from the lounge. The other, her, being removed. Only this time, the still had been altered. 3 figures were circled in red, faces faintly visible in the background, nearly imperceptible behind frosted glass. She zoomed in, fingers trembling. One was a woman she remembered from a panel on neural ethics in San Francisco. She'd given a talk about intentional memory collapse in generation. With pitch-black stillness, like a signal jammed just before reception. No visuals, no voices, only pressure. And once barely audible a laugh that sounded like it came from inside. Her teeth. She started looking for the others. Not directly. Not by name. That was too risky. She knew now there were protocols in place. There always had been. Egress wasn't just a system, it was a net. Something you fell into when you got too close to the wrong memory. But clues had started surfacing. Random emails with no sender addresses. Hidden QR codes embedded in sidewalk graffiti. A flyer for a memory cleansing retreat in Ohio that listed coordinates. Instead of a website. She followed the trail. Each point brought her closer, not to answers. Not exactly, but to others. People like her. Scarred, scattered, confused. People who hadn't aged right, who saw themselves in reflections that weren't theirs. Who remembered moments they hadn't lived, but felt with aching certainty. In a motel off Ice-Panii, in a room where the smoke detector had been disabled and the mirrors were covered in newspaper, Avery met 2 of them in person. They didn't use names. Names didn't hold, but the woman, older eyes, sharp despite the twitch, in her left hand explained it best. They hijacked us through patterns, she said, not memories. Memories can be erased. Patterns can't. They echo forward. If you lived through it once, it leaves a groove in the world. They use that groove to loop us back. The man nodded, speaking slower. It's not about you. It's about what you remember, about who you were before they gave you that story. Avery whispered. Who? He looked at her like she'd just asked what sunlight was. The ones who watched, the ones who made room 604 appear when you got too close. They're not people, they're resets. Every time one of us starts pulling at the thread, they send one in. Sometimes as a dream, sometimes as a person you think you knew. They fold you back into the loop before you can notice the edge. Avery said nothing, not because she didn't believe them, but because she did. And in that moment, she remembered something from before Lily disappeared. A shared dream. It had happened when she was 9. One night, her foster father woke both her and Lily up, shaking them. Pale, panicked, said he heard them speaking in the same voice. Said he heard them whispering from inside the walls. She had forgotten that, or someone made sure she did. Back home, everything began to unravel. Her emails started rewriting themselves. Documents she had stored offline, locked under encryption, were overwritten with video stills of people she didn't know, all staring into the camera, mouths open mid-sentence but no audio. The messages got more specific, more personal. They knew about Lily, about room 604, about the summer of '96, and one of them simply read, asterisk, asterisk, you're not crazy. They lied to you. Look under the floorboards. Asterisk, asterisk, she did. In her bedroom, under the boards near the baseboard heater, she found a tape. Not digital, VHS. It was labeled, in shaky handwriting, asterisk, asterisk, replay, only if called. Asterisk, asterisk, she didn't own a VHS player anymore. She had to find one at a thrift store, dusty, barely functional, the kind of tech you didn't expect to still hum with life. She fed the tape in .static. Then a home video. Grainy, sun-bleached. The camera jittered as if handled by a child. It was a birthday party. Her birthday, 13 years old. She saw herself, awkward in an oversized sweater, standing next to Lily. Lily held the gift, spoke into the camera. Asterisk, asterisk, we're not real today. Just for today, we don't have to be real. Asterisk, asterisk, the image cut. More static. Then. A shift, not the party, a dark room. Lily again, but older than she should have been. Sitting in the same chair Avery had seen in the lab, her eyes were swollen, like she'd been crying for hours. She stared directly at the lens. Then whispered, asterisk, asterisk, they used you to test me. You were always the delivery system. Asterisk, asterisk, Avery screamed. Threw the tape across the room. Because it wasn't possible. She never saw Lily again after 13. She never remembered her surviving. But what if her memories had been changed, not erased, rewritten? Suddenly, everything tightened. The hotel, the lounge, the false smiles, the people in the background, they were never bystanders, they were handlers. Planted figures in a memory constructed to contain her. And then came the third voice. In her head. In the static, in the ringing between phone calls and forgotten dreams, a voice with no gender, no tone, just wait. Observer log, subject 08B, nearing breach threshold. Inject loop variant Delta 7. Reset via familial trigger. Continue containment. No awakening allowed. Asterisk, asterisk, she froze. This wasn't paranoia. This was observation. They weren't just watching. They were logging her every thought, every deviation, every moment she strayed to. Far from the implanted narrative, Avery dropped the tape player, backed into the hallway, stared at the walls. Suddenly, they didn't feel like walls. They felt like placeholders, cardboard stand-ins. The world no longer carried weight. The physics felt cheap, looped, like a set about to collapse. She was the experiment, and someone or something had been running her life like a scripted series. Only now, the loop was bleeding. Messages began appearing in places they shouldn't. Her reflection spelled out phrases in fogged mirrors. Asterisk, asterisk, you were right all along. Asterisk, asterisk, junk mail. Typed her name backwards with the subject line. Asterisk, asterisk, Irie found footage from 20 years ago. Asterisk, asterisk, an old photo of her and Lily turned up in a library archive where it had never been stored. On the back, in faded Sharpie. Asterisk, asterisk, we are the glitch. Wake them all. Asterisk, asterisk, then she saw them again. The others, in crowds, at intersections, in lobbies. Eyes catching hers for half a second, flickering with a panic they knew they couldn't express out loud. One of them, man, elderly woman with burn scars and a Ken, brushed against her shoulder in a subway tunnel and whispered, asterisk, asterisk, you'll know it's real when the sky skips. Asterisk, asterisk, and 2 nights later, it did, just for a blink. The clouds stuttered, reversed, realigned, like time folded, and Avery remembered a symbol from her childhood, something she hadn't thought of in 20 years. A shape Lily used to draw on everything, notebooks, bathroom stalls, even their skin. A circle, broken at the bottom, with 2 slashes through the center. She'd called it a keyhole. Now, Avery was seeing that symbol everywhere, graffiti, crop fields, scratched into elevator buttons. The message was spreading, and something was angry about it. At 2:11 a.m., her TV turned on by itself. Static, then the lounge. Then her face. But this time, it smiled on its own. She hadn't moved. She felt her own muscles freeze. On screen, the other version of her leaned forward and whispered, too softly for the mic to catch. But the subtitles appeared anyway. Asterisk, asterisk, I'm the version they couldn't delete. Asterisk, asterisk, then blackness. No credits. No exit button. Only silence. Only your reflection in the screen. And the unshakable feeling that this story hasn't just been watching you, it's been waiting for you to remember your role.